Welcome to my YouTube channel at Sci-Fi Tales Pools. Please subscribe, like, and share to support my channel. Ethan Cole lived in a small apartment near the sea. The sound of waves came through his open window, and the night air was cool. He felt tired after a long day teaching at the local school. He took off his shoes and placed them neatly by the bed. He looked out the window for a moment, seeing the moon hanging low over the water. The light of the moon made the room look silver and calm. He thought of how quiet his life had been lately, and how little had changed in many months. He yawned and lay down, pulling the blanket over himself and closing his eyes. The first thing he noticed was the strange light. It was not the warm glow of the lamp in his room. This light was softer and seemed to come from everywhere. He felt the bed under him, but it was no longer the same bed. It was larger, and the sheets were smooth like silk. He slowly sat up and found himself in a room he did not know. The walls were made of stone and tall curtains hung from the ceiling. There was the smell of candles and fresh flowers in the air. Ethan looked at his hands and saw that he was wearing clothes he had never seen before. A long robe of fine cloth with gold thread ran along the edges. The weight of it felt strange to him. He stood up and his bare feet touched a soft rug. The door to the room opened, and a young man in fine dress stepped inside. He bowed and called him my lord. Ethan could not answer. He only stared, trying to understand. The young man stepped aside, and two women in simple dresses entered, carrying trays of fruit and bread. They placed them on a small table near the window. One of them told him, "The Queen will see you soon." Ethan felt his heart beat faster. He wanted to speak, but no words came. He walked to the window and looked outside. The view was unlike anything he had known. A vast garden stretched out below, with fountains and white stone paths beyond the garden. High walls guarded the palace, and beyond those walls, green hills rolled under the sun. The sound of soft steps made him turn. A woman entered wearing a crown of silver. Her hair was dark, and her eyes were calm and bright. She smiled at him and said that she was Queen Evelyn Grace. She spoke as if she knew him well. She said they had been married the night before. Ethan felt lost. He had tried to remember the day before, but his mind gave him only the image of lying in his own bed in his small apartment. The Queen stepped closer and took his hand. Her touch was warm. She told him that he was safe and that he was home. Ethan felt the weight of her words, but they made no sense. He looked around again. The room, the clothes, the garden, all felt real. Yet it was nothing like his life had been. He wanted to ask how he had come here, but no sound left his mouth. He followed her as she led him through a large doorway into a long hall. Sunlight poured through tall windows. The walls were lined with paintings of kings and queens from times long past. Servants bowed as they passed. Ethan felt their eyes on him. He could hear whispers behind him but could not make out their words. The Queen led him to a smaller room with a round table set for two. She invited him to sit and eat. She spoke gently, telling him about the land, the people, and the life they would share. Ethan listened, but his mind kept returning to the moment. He had opened his eyes in the strange room. He wondered if he would ever see his old life again. The Queen reached across the table and touched his hand again. Her smile held a kindness that made him feel a little less afraid. Ethan woke again the next morning, and for a moment he hoped he would see his small apartment and hear the sound of waves. But when he opened his eyes, the high ceiling and silk curtains were still there. The golden light of the sun came through the window and warmed the room. The robe he had worn yesterday was folded neatly on a chair, and next to it lay a set of clothes made for walking outside. A servant entered and bowed before speaking. He told Ethan that the Queen wished to walk with him in the gardens. Ethan nodded slowly, still unsure of everything but willing to follow. The servant helped him dress in a simple tunic and boots. The cloth was softer than anything he had worn before, and the boots fit perfectly, as if they had been made for him. When he stepped outside, the air was fresh and filled with the scent of flowers. The garden stretched out in every direction with bright colors and the sound of water flowing in the fountains. Birds flew between the trees and the sky was clear. Queen Evelyn stood near a white stone arch. She smiled as he walked toward her. She looked different in the sunlight. Her crown shone and her gown moved gently in the breeze. She greeted him with warmth and began to lead him down a path lined with roses as they walked. She spoke about the kingdom, She told him that the people were proud, but that they feared the unrest in the far towns. She explained that the land had seen peace for many years, but now some lords were rising against the crown. Ethan listened quietly, trying to understand the weight of her words. She told him that his arrival was seen as a sign by many that hope still lived in the heart of the kingdom. Ethan felt strange hearing this. He had no memory of agreeing to be part of this place, yet the queen spoke as if he belonged here. She guided him to a stone bench beside a small pond. They sat and watched the fish swim below the surface. The sunlight made the water sparkle. She told him that today he would meet the Council of Advisors. They would want to know more about him and see for themselves. The man who now stood beside their queen. After a while, they returned to the palace. The tall doors opened to reveal a large hall with a long table. Around it sat men and women in fine robes. Each one rose and bowed to the queen, their eyes turned to Ethan. Some looked curious while others seemed doubtful. The queen asked him to stand beside her. She spoke to the council, telling them that Ethan had come into her life by fate, and that she believed he was meant to help guide the kingdom in the days to come. One of the older men asked about Ethan's skills. Ethan answered that he had been a teacher in his own land, and that he cared for the people he taught. He said he valued fairness and peace. His words were simple, but they seemed to ease some of the tension in the room. The council members began to speak among themselves. The queen placed a hand on his arm and told the council she would take full responsibility for him. The meeting ended with polite bows and quiet whispers. The queen led Ethan out through a side hall and into a small library. Tall shelves filled with books reached the ceiling. A fire burned in the hearth, making the room warm. She told him that soon he would need to learn more about the history of the kingdom. She pointed to a table where a few books lay open. She said they would study together in the evenings. Ethan felt the weight of the day pressing on him, but also a growing sense of calm in the presence of the queen. He knew he was far from his old life, but the kindness in her voice and the steady way she walked beside him made the strange palace feel a little less foreign. Ethan woke early to the sound of bells ringing somewhere in the palace. The light outside was soft, and the air in the room felt cool. He dressed in the clothes left for him and stepped into the hallway where a servant waited to guide him to the training yard. The queen had told him the night before that today he would see more of the life inside the palace. The yard was wide and filled with men and women practicing with swords and shields. The sound of metal striking rang out, and the smell of dust filled the air. Ethan watched as the fighters moved with skill and speed. The captain of the guard approached and bowed to him. The captain offered to show Ethan some basic defense skills. Ethan hesitated but nodded and took the wooden practice sword. The weight felt strange in his hands, but he tried to follow the captain's movements. The queen arrived soon after, wearing a gown of deep blue. She walked among the guards, speaking kindly to them before coming to stand beside Ethan. She told him that the kingdom needed leaders who could protect not only with words, but also with strength. Her gaze was steady and her voice calm. Ethan felt a mix of unease and determination. He continued the lesson until the captain bowed and stepped back, telling him he had done well for a first attempt. They left the yard and walked together toward the west wing of the palace. The queen led him through tall doors into a hall lined with banners. Each banner held the symbol of a noble house. She explained that these were the families who had sworn loyalty to the crown for generations. She also told him that some of these houses were now unsure of their place and might not stand with her in the coming days. They stopped before a pair of carved wooden doors. The queen pushed them open to reveal a council chamber where several nobles were already waiting. They rose and bowed as she entered, then their eyes turned to Ethan. The queen spoke to them about the unrest in the outer towns and how it was spreading. She said the people needed unity and hope. She introduced Ethan as her husband and spoke of the prophecy that had brought him here. Some faces softened at her words, while others showed doubt. One noble spoke about the danger from the lords who wanted to take the throne. The queen answered with firm resolve, saying that with Ethan by her side they would face any threat together. Ethan stood silent beside her, feeling the weight of the eyes upon him. He knew they were judging his worth with every breath he took. After the meeting, the queen led Ethan to a quiet balcony overlooking the gardens. The sun was higher now, casting warm light over the fountains. She asked him what he thought of the council, said it was clear that some trusted her deeply, while others feared change. She nodded and told him trust must be earned over time. She also told him that tomorrow there would be a gathering in the main square where they would speak to the people directly. Ethan spent the rest of the day walking through the palace halls, learning the paths and speaking with servants. He listened to their stories about the land and the years of peace under the queen. Cerule many spoke with pride, but some with worry about the future. As evening came, he returned to the library where the queen was waiting. She had laid out books and maps for them to study together. They sat by the fire as she explained the borders of the kingdom and the names of each province. Ethan listened closely, trying to remember every detail. The warmth of the fire and the calm of her voice made him feel more at ease. He still did not know how he had come to this place, but he began to feel that perhaps he was meant to be here. The queen looked at him for a moment, then smiled and said she believed in him, and that together they would protect the kingdom. The morning sun lit the palace walls as Ethan stepped into the main square beside the queen. The space was filled with people from the city. They stood in clusters, speaking softly among themselves. The queen held her head high and walked forward with calm steps. Ethan stayed close, feeling the eyes of the crowd on him. Guards lined the edges of the square, their armor bright in the light. A wooden platform stood at the center. The queen stepped onto it and turned to face the people. She began to speak, her voice strong and clear. She spoke of unity and the need for every man and woman to stand together. She told them the kingdom was facing unrest and that dark times could come. If they were not careful, she said, Ethan had come into her life by fate, and that she trusted him to stand beside her and serve the people. The crowd listened. Some faces showed hope, while others held doubt. A man near the front called out, asking if Ethan was ready to defend the land. Ethan stepped forward and spoke with steady words. He said he was not born here, but he had come to see the beauty of this place and the strength of its people. He said he would give his life to protect it if needed. His words carried over the square, and a few voices called out in support. The queen placed a hand on his shoulder and the crowd quieted. She told them that loyalty and courage were not found in blood alone, but in the choices one made. The people seemed to take in her words. Slowly more voices joined in cheering and clapping. The sound grew until it filled the square. The queen smiled and nodded to Ethan before stepping down from the platform. They walked back toward the palace through the cheering crowd. Ethan felt the weight in his chest lighten for the first time since waking in this strange new life inside the palace. The queen led him to a war room. Maps were spread across a long table. Small, carved figures marked towns and borders. She pointed to the outer regions where unrest had begun. She said these places needed support and that they would travel there soon to speak with the people directly. For the rest of the day, Ethan trained again with the captain of the guard. His arms ached, but he kept going, remembering the faces in the square. The captain corrected his stance and praised his determination after training. Ethan joined the queen in the library where they read letters sent from the outer towns. Some told of shortages and fear. Others spoke of loyalty and hope. As night came, the queen asked Ethan to walk with her in the garden. Illa. The moonlight made the fountains shine, and the air was cool. She spoke of her worries and the danger of the lords who sought to take her crown. She said their next journey would not be without risk. Ethan told her he would not leave her side no matter what lay ahead. She looked at him for a moment and then nodded. They stopped near a tall tree at the edge of the garden. The sound of water from a nearby fountain filled the silence. The queen thanked him for speaking to the people with such honesty. She said his words had touched hearts in ways she could not have done alone. Ethan felt a warmth in her voice that made the night seem less cold. They returned to the palace and parted for the night. Ethan lay in the large bed, staring at the ceiling. He thought of his small apartment by the sea, and how far away it felt now. He wondered if he would ever see it again, yet he also thought of the queen and the promise he had made. He closed his eyes, knowing that tomorrow would bring new trials and that he would face them beside her. The road to the outer towns was long and dusty. Ethan rode beside the queen on a strong brown horse. Guards followed in a line behind them, and banners of the crown waved in the wind. The land around them was wide and open, with fields of grain and small villages in the distance. People came out of their homes to watch as the group passed. Some waved and others stood in silence. After many hours, they reached the first town. The streets were narrow and lined with simple houses. The air was filled with the smell of bread baking and the sound of children playing. The queen and Ethan dismounted and walked among the people. The townsfolk gathered in the square, looking curious and cautious. The queen spoke to them about the unrest and the need for unity. She promised to send more supplies and to protect their homes. Ethan also spoke, telling them he had seen the strength of their land and would stand with them in any trouble. The people began to open up. Some thanked the queen, while others voiced their worries about the lords who caused fear. Ethan listened to each person and gave them words of comfort. The queen met with the town elders in a small hall, and Ethan sat with the younger men and women, learning about their daily lives. By the time they left the town, the mood had changed, and the people waved them off with smiles. They traveled to other towns over the next days. Each place had its own troubles, but also its own strengths. In one village, they found the storehouses nearly empty, and the queen ordered grain to be sent at once. In another, they found a group of young men ready to join the guard and defend their homes. Ethan trained with them for an afternoon, showing them the moves he had learned from the captain of the guard. One evening as the sun set, they camped by a river. Water reflected the colors of the sky and the air was cool. Ethan sat by the fire with the queen. They spoke of the journey and how the people had responded. She said she believed the kingdom could stand strong if they continued to bring hope and help. Ethan felt a quiet pride in hearing her say this. On the final day of their journey, they returned to the palace. The gates opened and the guards saluted as they rode, and the queen called the council together and spoke of what they had seen. She told them the people were loyal but needed action from their leaders. She said Ethan had been by her side through it all and had earned the trust of many. The council members nodded, and some even smiled at Ethan for the first time. They spoke of plans to send aid to the towns and to strengthen the guard. The queen declared that a festival would be held to show the unity of the kingdom. In the days that followed, the palace was filled with music and laughter as preparations began. When the festival came, the main square was decorated with flowers, and bright cloth stalls offered food and games, and the people from the city and nearby villages filled the streets. The queen and Ethan walked among them, speaking and sharing in the joy. Music played and dancers moved in the open spaces. Children laughed and ran through the crowd. As night fell, lanterns were lit and the square glowed with warm light. The queen led Ethan to the balcony of the palace. From there they looked over the city. The sound of celebration rose up to meet them. She turned to him and said that he had become part of the heart of the kingdom. Ethan looked out at the people and felt the truth in her words. He thought of the life he had left behind in the small apartment by the sea, felt far away now, replaced by this land and its people. He knew his place was here beside the queen. Together, it would guide and protect the kingdom. The sound of music and voices filled the night as they stood side by side, watching over the realm. They now share it. Thank you for watching and being part of our community.